Okay, so I want to welcome everybody to our watercolor demo today. As Jan mentioned, it's co-sponsored with the South Huntington, Harborfield, and Huntington Public Libraries. And we're so happy to host Jan again. She's done programs for us since this whole virtual thing started, and they've been super popular and fun. You actually watch this painting take shape before your eyes, so it's really cool. So today, our theme is Flora and Fauna. So today, Jan has a beautiful painting with a demo for us. So Jan, take it away.
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to be kind of rude, and I'm going to mute everybody because we're hearing all kinds of ambient noise, and we want the recording to be as clean as possible. So I just muted everybody only because we hear dogs and husbands and wives and little pitter-patter feet in the background. We want the recording to be really clean for you guys. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, libraries. Your libraries work so hard to bring this programming to you. This, and I'm sure lots and lots of other really great things to engage the patrons. So I'm thrilled to be one of those things that that they bring to you. And we did it last summer, and it was great. This is my Jan Cam, as I call it. And it's really where I take a theme, and the theme is Flora and Fauna. I didn't really know what that was. I had to look it up. So that was one of the library's theme, and the other one was Tales and Trails. Is that right? I think I got that right. So things you might encounter if you were walking along a trail. So it's sort of that, being outside and whatnot. So I think that that's a lot of fun. So I have an image that a friend of mine had actually taken this photograph on one of her walks. And I thought it was so perfect for this session. So we are going to attempt to do this in 1 hour. So I'm going to switch cameras. If you have any questions, please put your question in the chat, and they will ask me the question, and I'll answer it because I'm somewhat used to multitasking. And then at the end, we'll open it up and we'll have a full discussion. So I hope you stay on to the end. It's only going to be an hour or under. And I'm going to switch my cameras right now. Okay, so look at this photograph my girlfriend took. I don't know there are bird people out there. I really don't know my birds. So I thought this was such a perfect imagery, an egret, or I really don't know, but I thought it was really great. And so I already have it drawn out. You might be able to see my light pencil a little bit. What I'll be doing is that as I'm working on a particular detail, I'll be able to zoom in, and you could watch the brush strokes a little bit with that. And then I'll zoom back out, and I'll talk every step of the way. So I'm going to start with a background, and the background is going to be the sky, and that's going to be with about a number 10 brush. And I'm going to use I'm going to use a cobalt. And so I'm basically going to start by coming around the wings, because the wings are really kind of on the light side, because the light is catching the wings and the top of the head and whatnot. So how do we paint something that's white? Well, in watercolors, we leave the paper. That is what is white. And so I'll go a little closer just to show you how I'm going about this. So I'm basically just moving my watercolor paint to go right around my marks. That is the bird's neck and the top of their head. Now, watercolors is an interesting medium, and that is that you don't really need a lot for things to happen, meaning it must move in water. And so for it to move in water, you just have to make sure you give it water. That is one of the most difficult things, I think, for artists that want to try watercolor to get used to, is not putting on gobs and gobs of paint. You are simply putting it in and then watching something happen, because watercolor continues to move in water. So the paint moves in water. It's not gopped on and, in any way. So it takes a lot of getting used to. But once you understand it, there's some very, very specific techniques that we use to understand the properties of watercolor and to embrace the things that watercolor has to bring us. And that is the most exciting thing. I know some of my students are on today, and they could tell you just how I feel about watercolor. And it's a passion and just a deep love and respect for this medium. And so let me zoom out a little bit from my other camera. There we go. So it's understanding the medium. And it doesn't work like any other medium, which I'm thrilled about that it doesn't. I'm thrilled that it has all the beautiful properties that it does, and it gives and affords us the opportunity to really explore this exquisite medium. So one of the things that I'll do is I went right through the leg here, because the leg on this, whatever it is, I guess egret, stork, I don't really know my birds. I apologize. I guess if I'm doing Flora and Fauna, I should know my birds, but I don't. But I'm going to be making that back leg there darker, so I don't have to save it and go around it. I can allow it to go right through and then build it later. And that is a very interesting concept of understanding how to build a watercolor. Now, I'm going to have here I'll just back out and show you where I'm at. I just sort of have my light blue around here, but I want to bring it in here. But there are areas that sort of have this peekaboo blue in it, where the sky sort of peeks through the flora, the different. Here, let me go closer and show this to you. The different foliage that's here. So you could see I'm already getting an interesting sort of opportunity to have this come on. And I use what's called a dot sprayer. And the dot sprayer comes out in a very kind of erratic, sporadic, spunky way. And it allows me to have these beautiful marks that are going on, and eliminates a lot of the fuss that you might have if you were trying to draw and paint all of these different pieces of leaves and, branches and whatnot. So it gives us a chance to have textures. That's a great way that I get a lot of textures. And again, my students know that there's lots of ways. I will share this with you. There's lots of ways to build texture. There's lots of ways to save your whites. There's lots of ways to correct a watercolor. It's just a matter of learning them and then working with them. So you could kind of feel I have a little bit of texture, and that's where those leaves and branches are going to go. And so what I basically have now is I have somewhat completed my blue sky. And that is where that part is at. And so now I could go about basically building the rest of the painting. So I like to do a background quickly because it gives me an opportunity to have not have to fuss so much over things. And basically, like, I look at it this way, like almost half the painting is done already. I kind of like that. And let me just straighten this out a little bit. It's a little crooked for you. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, so straighten that out. Okay, let's go in and work on the, while this is wet, I feel like we should work a little bit of this foliage. So I have some wonderful greens that I love, and I'm going to, again, utilize the ability of the dot sprayer to just start dropping into those dots. A dot sprayer is not an even spray. It's just sort of gives you little sporadic things. And you could see I'm just what we call scumbling in some of the green that would go in here. Now we know green and is made of blue and yellow. So we already have the blue. So it might be nice, since I'm going to have some yellows and whatnot in the bird itself. I apologize. I don't know what kind of bird it is, but if anybody does, you could just put it in the chat and let me know, because, and here's the bird. I'll just put it side by side so you can kind of see it, what I'm doing. How's that? Can everybody see that okay? Move my camera over a little bit so you could see that. There we go. Okay. All right. This way you could see the painting and the photo at the same time. You'll see what I'm doing. And, in a class, everybody has a printout of the photo that we're going to be painting, and they already have their drawing done. So what I have now is I'm just going to drop in some yellow into the green, just to amp it up a little bit. I have some great colors, maybe a little bit of orange in there because the beak is orange and part of the wing is a little orange. So that gives us a chance to say, okay, there's some areas that have colors more than just green. And I think that that's a really nice way to look at a painting and say, oh, there's other colors going on, not just green is here, blue is there, white is there. And that's called bridging the palette. And so we get this feeling of foliage without painting every leaf, which could be really tedious and not enjoyable at all. Here's my dot sprayer. If I hit it with some dots, let me go closer and show you what just happened. The water spurted out, and what it did was it just gave me, it's pushing the color aside, and it's giving me little watercolor blossoms, which again, it's one of the beautiful things about watercolor. And what I'll do is I'm just going to have a little bit of fun here, only because I think watercolors should be and are fun. I'm just going to do a little bit of splatter. And just to give it a little bit more oomph, just to help it read a little bit deeper, darker, and richer. Got a little spot up there. I'm just going to eliminate it. Gone, gone, gone. Lots of ways to correct. Now, this is coming out very loose. The splatter is not very, it's melting very quickly because everything is so wet down here. So let's leave here and start working on the bird itself. So we see a lot of blue and orange. Now, that's a very interesting combination, and one that certainly my students could tell you why I like that. That is what we call complementary colors. And when you put blue and orange next to each other, my goodness, it gives you the most beautiful ability to build a painting. When they touch, it will sort of dull each other out. But when they are next to each other, that's why a lot of sports teams are blue and orange, because they're great sparky colors next to each other. Just like green and red, those are complementary colors, and violet and yellow, complementary colors. And in fact, we just did a painting last week. We did a still life series, and we used yellow and violet to create olives and olive oil, and it really came out great. So I'm going to go closer just so that you could see some of the marks that I'm making. And it's very loose. And I think that's I always feel like that's a great way to start a painting, is go loose, use your looser marks now, and then we go tighter as we finish up the painting. So we go tighter and tighter as we get into more and more of the details. So I'm just adding some of this great blue color. I'm using cobalt. When you're painting watercolors, what's very important is that you use professional paint and professional paper. And so I will just share this with you for those of you who don't know. The the biggest mistake, well, there's a lot of mistakes people make, but a big mistake is saying, I'm just a beginner and I don't know anything about watercolors, so I should just begin with beginner stuff. Student grade paints, student grade paper. Very big mistake because you can't learn with those supplies. It's very hard to learn with those supplies. Very, very hard. And so I would just say at this stage of the game, if you're looking to do watercolors, just enjoy the good stuff because once you buy some basics, it's not that much more expensive. But your results will be amazingly different.
Hi,
just
Jen.
figuring that out. Yeah.
Catherine, we have a question in the chat. Are you working on a wet canvas or dry?
We work on paper, and I'm only right this area here. So you saw me wetting the background as I was adding the color in. So the entire paper is not wet. I'm controlling where I'm putting my my paint down. So if we were to wet the whole piece of paper, it would just be pretty soggy and I wouldn't be able to have the control that I have. So the background and down here, I did work, where it was wet, but right now the inside of the bird itself is dry. So, and it's, it is watercolor paper. This is Arches. I'm working on Arches watercolor paper here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Good question. Good question. Yeah, because we really don't know, like, is it wet into wet? And that's a very basic question, actually. Are we, how do we work wet into wet? Like right here where I am, this is all dry. Otherwise, it would be spreading out all over the place, and I would not be able to control putting this paint down the way that I am. The only way I'm able to put it down and hold on to any control is because it's not pre-wet. But like I'll take a little area like that I just did, and I said, well, let me feather that up. Let me feather this down. So you need a little bit of water to move it. You need water to move the paint around. Well, that's another thing. I find a lot of students in the beginning, they'll work very, very dry, and very controlled and very pieced together. But to me, the joy is like, look at all this explosion of color that's going on here, and giving us the opportunity to really have such a great use of watercolor and a great opportunity to see areas, what happens when it's wet and wet. Down here, I'll be going back in and I'll be showing you a dry splatter over there as soon as that is dry. But right now it's wet, so I just want to leave that alone. And I do have all my brushes sort of next to me, all different sizes, so that if I need to go and do a fine area, I can switch a brush really quickly. And that is super important, that you have all your brushes ready to go. And it's hard to see, but I have a drying mat right here. So this is a black dish drying mat, which I find invaluable. Some people use towels, paper towels. I find that I don't know. I found that this is such a great way to go, which is this drying mat, that I'm always using this to monitor how much water is on my brush. I figured all this stuff out, so I'm able to effectively teach it and give you guys a really great experience in terms of understanding and learning and getting a great painting. I know I have some great students that are on this call, which I really appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you so much. So I did recognize a lot of the names. Going to switch colors. So again, I'm using this idea of this complements the orange and the blue, because this beak is just so vibrant, which was why I started adding some of the orange to the bottom, because I knew that's what we call bridging the palette, meaning just because you have, these colors in various spots doesn't mean you don't look to integrate them in a way that makes it painterly. We want your painting to be painterly. That's really Otherwise, otherwise just you got the photograph, right? That's the way I look at it. You got the photo. But if we want to make it in a painterly way, we try to find ways to do that. And that's one of the things that I really love to help students do.
Okay, we have another question in the chat from
Katie. Yeah, thank you.
Says, I know you love your number 10 brush from the museum. It seems stiffer than all of my silver black velvet brushes and maybe more manageable. Can you name other brands that may be similar in stiffness to yours?
Yeah, right now I'm using the silver black velvets from Cheap Joe's is a very good brush. I'm happy with those brushes. So there are other ones, and they're not. I don't believe in getting sable guys because I find that they just end up being like a hot mess, and they end up really messing up so badly. So I'm really very, I don't feel we need to have sable brushes to get good results. And in fact, I really love my synthetics, and my Cheap Joe's has got a very nice selection of these. They've gotten so good at making these brushes feel like they work like a sable brush, and yet they don't lose everything that a sable brush might lose. So that's, the way that it's held together. A lot of times, the sable brushes will really only last a certain amount of time. I have not found that with the better synthetics. The better synthetics do actually have a pretty good lifeline. And I'm thrilled about that because I'd rather save the Kolinsky horse tails and whoever else they're getting their hair from. Yeah, it's just not necessary. You see, I'm spending a little bit of time on this top part because I really feel that that's really what is, the main part, like, of the painting is going to be right here. So I'm working on a dry paper right here and just giving this a nice opportunity to have these colors mix. I'm using a few different blues. I'm using my cerulean as well as my cobalt and my a little bit of my orange, and just softening some of these marks. So the cerulean is a bit warmer of a color, of a blue. Cobalt is a little cooler. And I really, knowing color temperature is really important. What's a cool, my students know that I have colors like dragon's blood, which is a very cool orange. So I will use that as opposed to the manufacturer Schmenke that has a beautiful warm orange, translucent orange, which is what I'm using right here. And so I will just describe this process a little bit because I am mixing on the paper and not on my palette. And I'll just describe that a little bit to you guys because I find that the when I mix colors on my paper, you actually see both of the colors very nicely, even though they dull out to be a softer version of the orange and a softer version of the violet or the blue, whatever you're working with. When you pre-mix it in your palette, there's a tendency for it to just dull out and become a very gray-brown color. So that's how I get my excitement with my colors, is by mixing these colors in on my paper in the moment.
Okay, Jan, we have another question from Joan. What size rigger brush are you using?
This rigger, I love this rigger. This is a number 1. This is a silver black velvet. I don't know if you could read that, silver black velvet. And it's a great brush. This is a number 1. So I'm really happy with that. Let me back out and show you where I'm at. And you could see how it's all starting to kind of come together. So that's a 1. My suggestion is to find a manufacturer that you like. If you want a more expensive brush, there's Escoda Prado, which is a beautiful brand, and they are synthetic, and they're beautiful. So you could go to the store and kind of try them out and see how that you feel about them. That's a nice way to go, because every brush has a different feel, you know, not two brushes are sort of the same.
Okay, we have another question from.
Oh, good. You guys are great. Thank you so much.
Everybody's very inquiring tonight. What kind of paper should we buy?
Well, the best paper that I've used, and I use it 99.9% of the time, is Arches. Arches 140 is a beautiful paper. Arches 300, that's a cold press paper, meaning it's got a lot of bumps on it, hills and valleys. I also use the Arches 300 hot press, which has a little bit of tooth on it. A watercolor paper has tooth. And so I, again, don't just go by those pads that you might find in, you know, your local hobby store. You really want to make sure that you get a really good quality paper. So Arches is great. If you subscribe to any of the newsletters like Jerry's Artorama, Cheap Joe's, Blick's, they have other paper that you could purchase, which nice paper that I use is Kilimanjaro. That's a great paper. Another paper that I use is, I'm going to blank out right now. Waterford, Saunders Waterford, beautiful paper, beautiful paper. As long as you make sure it's professional grade. Cotman paints, Cotman paper, I don't recommend. It's just too, it doesn't have the properties that it needs to do what watercolor is supposed to do. As far as brands of watercolor paint, I would stick with Daniel Smith, Holbein. And by the way, a lot of them do have student grade. Avoid the student grade and just treat yourself to the really good stuff. That's the way to go. So I'm going in with a little bit of violet right now, just popping out some of these areas on the wings and whatnot, just to build a little bit more of what I see, you know, going on in the wing. So I want to just deepen it a little bit and go a little bit further with it, push it a little bit more, the colors a little bit more. So professional watercolors will have a tendency to move well in water. They will granulate. Professional watercolors just have so many great properties that you would have to explore to really discover the beauty of them. And that's part of that whole discovery process. I mean, I do have my supply list, and it's available. You could actually go right onto my website and you could just see exactly my my supply list. You can see exactly what I'm using. One thing is I do really enjoy sharing all of what I do and how I do it and how I achieve it with you guys. That's just a beautiful thing that I just feel that I, you know, not knowing that I would ever be doing this in terms of teaching this, I just feel it's just something that I really long to share with everybody is what I've learned, because I've taken the workshops and I've bought the DVDs and the books and I've walked away a lot of times just very discouraged and not getting good results. And I'm very, very proud to say, and maybe if any of my students care to chime in with a little bit of a chat here, I'm very proud that they really do get beautiful, gorgeous results. And I'm very happy to see that. And they end up getting, you know, requests for commissions and, you know, pet portraits and so many things. It's just, you know, they go around and paint, you know, their grandkids and And that part of that sharing just really means a lot to me. So you can see I'm moving around I guess I'll call it an egret because I just don't know what it is. And nobody's said anything in the chat, so I have to go by what I think it is. I should have asked my girlfriend, but I didn't. But where it's dry, I could build it a little bit more of the detail, right? I could go back in with my nice tight little rigger and find some more opportunities to just build this a little bit more. So watercolors are really a timing thing. You really have to time when you go in and when you do what you're going to do. It's not just about working an area until you kill it, which a lot of people do, unfortunately. I'm timing everything that I'm doing here. So I want to get off the bird a little bit, and I want to show you some more techniques on the foliage. One of my other favorite things is to take a natural sponge, and I just give it a little bit of water, and then I sort of dunk it in my colors, right in my palette. Oh, and I'll just bring my palette into view a little bit for you also. It's part of it's right here. So what I'm doing is I'm sort of going into all my greens. I have like 4 different greens here. And I'm just kind of getting a little bit of that on my sponge. And it's always good to have a scrap piece of paper to see what that looks like before you go too much further. So here's my scrap piece of paper, and I just want to see, and oh yeah, that looks really good. So that's going to give me yet another texture. So we already did a couple of textures here, right? We did our dot sprayer, and then I did a little splatter. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, and I'll go a little closer for you, and I'll show you I'm just using my natural sponge a little bit to get yet a little bit more texture into the foliage.
Okay, we have another question.
Go for it. Yes, good.
Do you have a list of supplies a beginner should purchase to get started?
Yes, I do. I have 2 lists of supplies. One is beginner's basics, and one is for more advanced. So yes, I do. And I also have a lot of videos on my website that you can view. So I encourage you to, I'll go to, I don't know if you want to type it in for me. It's janguarinofineart.com. And if you go there, you'll see videos, you'll see supplies, you'll see templates. There's a whole lot of resources there for you. So another tool is an old toothbrush. So again, I'm just going to test it out here, and that's what that's going to look like when I go and put it on my paper. This is dry, so I'm going to get, it's still a little damp actually, so it's not quite as dry a mark as it might be. There it goes. Okay, there it is. So those are a few different ways in which I get different textures. I've showed you a few. I have about, I don't know, a dozen more. To me, a painting, unless you have splatter and splatter and drips, it's just not a watercolor. And let me speak to that for a moment, because I think that that's really important to talk about. And that is that letting it be a watercolor. I think one of the most beautiful things to do with watercolor is to see how a watercolor is built and the things that you were sort of okay with doing in the moment, creating these different textures and whatnot, and how you went about that. So I think that drips and splatters and watercolor blossoms and things like that, I think are just really fabulous tools that watercolor offers us if we are, sort of okay to embrace it. And so I really do love embracing it. So now I'm going to add some dry marks for the bark. So I took a workshop with somebody, Asian watercolorist, Keiko Tanabe. She's actually coming to paint with us next week at the Firefly Gallery in Northport. And she calls that thirsty brush. So that's really cool, like that dry kind of mark that makes it look kind of earthy and giving you some nice thirsty marks, bark marks, thirsty marks. She calls it thirsty, which I love that saying. I think that's great. There's a little wetter over here, so that's not as thirsty as I would like it to be. So you just wait until you can sort of build some of these darks.
So we have an answer in the chat. Judith thinks that the bird is an egret.
Okay, I think you're maybe right. An egret sounds good. I will find out for sure. By the way, I know that people are always so afraid of watercolor because they think they can't correct it. That is not true. Watercolors are absolutely correctable. And I have about, I don't know, a dozen different ways to correct a watercolor. So it does not necessarily mean that you're piling on a lot of color on top of it or a lot of white, although white is one of the ways we can, there are whites that we can use that give us, certain areas. Like, for instance, if you're doing and I do this frequently, I do house portraits, right? Well, the windows and all the little window panes could be pretty tedious. And so, you might want to just paint it and then go back in and add white to the window sills, the window panes. So there are different ways that you can get whites for sure. And so you could see now that building some of these twigs kind of going through these branches are helping to, to start tying the painting together. And they sort of come in and out, so you can actually melt some of these marks into, so they're just sort of peeking out here and there. That's a really fun little technique. I love doing that. And this is my rigger, which I love. You notice how far back I'm not on my rigger up here. I'm way back here because it just gives me an opportunity to have some, I heard it put this way, and I think it's a nice way to look at it. You're taking a line for a walk. And I think that that's such an interesting way to think about making these marks, is taking a line for a walk. So yeah, I love that. I thought that was so good. When I hear a good sort of phrase, I like to, hold on to it and share it. So what you're really looking to do here is just giving that feeling of the overall look and feel of what it is. Now, as I look and compare the two, I could say there's a little bit of a dark area right here, which I wanted to wait till it was dry to sort of do that. So let's go in and do that right now. Right here, I'd say, and right down here. And so I want to feather those marks a little bit so that they melt into the rest of the painting. Yeah, I think that pops it out very nicely. Maybe a little bit more right there. Maybe a little bit more right here. And it's not that we want it to look identical, but we want it to have the strength of presence that is here, right? And yet we want it to be interpretive. So this, let's just talk about this orange area right here. To tone that down, you might think, oh, well, let me go with brown. No, I go with the complement, which is blue. So the blue and the orange together will tone each other down to look like a deeper shade of, like a, I would say, a brown, but it's not brown. And I'm just doing, let me go closer and show you this. I'm just doing a little bit of lifting right here. So this is just a damp brush. And I'm just saying, okay, paint, just move a little bit aside for me so that I could make it tad lighter. Or you drop a little water in and you get a blossom. And nothing makes me happier than seeing a blossom going on. It is just, I hear that sometimes people like, oh, I got, they call them cauliflower marks or whatever. Well, to me, that's just watercolor. That is just what a watercolor is meant to have. And if you could learn to embrace that, then you are really doing what I think you're doing watercolor a real service, and you're giving it a really nice justice. You really are. There are a couple ways to lift paint. I sometimes will use this flat angled brush with a little bit of clean water. There's a nice white highlight right here that I lost. Well, I'm just going to go in with a little bit of water and a little bit of suggesting, and I can just lift that right up. And there it is. I'm almost down to the paper. So, not true, you can't fix a watercolor. Not true, not true, not true. Like I said, I have so many ways to get whites and hold on to whites and do correction techniques. Many, many ways. Many ways. You just have to learn them, that's all. And you have to know which ones you're going to use in a particular area. I use different techniques for different reasons. Right. How are we doing on time?
We're doing good. It's 4:43.
Oh boy. Okay. Excellent. So I like to think about maybe using my thinnest, finest marks for the last sort of, last marks that I'm going to put on. This is still a little damp on the bottom here, so it's going to be hard to get too many thirsty marks down here. But, it's definitely a timing thing that you want to grasp onto, is that understanding of timing and working areas that are dry instead of always working an area that's wet, wet, wet. You really want to know sort of how to approach that and how to think about that, and don't stay on one area just because it didn't come out exactly the way you want. You might have to let it go and then come back to it. And that's okay. Come back to it. You don't have to, stay on it and kill it. So I have one of my videos is what to do with an old sable brush. So I'll show you this brush. I find that very often these sable brushes really get to be just so unusable. They just look awful. And so what I'll do is I'll take it, and there's a whole trimming process, and I could get these kinds of thirsty marks like this with this chopped up, messed up old sable brush. But oh my goodness, it gives me the best marks. So I could be on the tip here, or I could be on the side. And yeah. And there's a point also where you do want a painting to sort of dry and stand back from it. I think that that's a really important part. So, for instance, to determine whether or not a painting is quote unquote done, that is always a big question that sort of comes up, is how do I know it's done? Well, you have to give it a rest first off. And one of the things I love to do is I love to take old mat board and just sort of take it, and that's a little too short. Let me get another piece here. And just put a quick mat around it. This is just an old mat that was cut into pieces. And then you start seeing it as maybe Maybe I don't need as much on the bottom. Maybe I could come in a little bit on the side. And maybe my painting is right there. Instead of saying I have to, because I painted to the edges, I have to hold on to that. Not true. You can find your composition and your sweet spot and have it framed to whatever makes you kind of happy. And that right there looks kind of okay to me. But it's also important to me that I take a moment, some time away from it, let it dry. And I'll show you guys when when I come back on how I will take this and put it vertical on my, and I'll actually tape it onto a frame vertically. And then I stand back from it because we tend to look at our artwork 3 inches from our noses. And what you really want to do is you want to be sure you stand back from it and that you put it vertical and get away from it. I remember when we would do classes and I would have everybody, in-person classes, because I haven't done that in a while. But everybody would stand back from their work. They would put it on an easel and we would stand back and look at everybody's work and they'd be like, oh, and they would be surprised how good it looked because they were working so close to it that all they saw were the imperfections instead of the beauty that was there the whole time. And that's such an interesting way to take a pause from your artwork and say, okay, I just can't look at this anymore, or I just need to take a break from it. And that's really an important part to do that, is to take a break, put it vertical, stand back from it, see it as artwork that might be on a wall or on a mat or on a frame, and stand back from it, because we get so tight and so close to our work, right? We get so close to it and we don't take the time to stand back from it. So I'm just giving, now that this is dry, I could go back in and add some of these other, kind of the wings or that I saw in the photo, and different things like that. This mark looks a little odd to me. So I'll just show you quickly. I'll just go in and just sort of soften it with my brush and go into the frame a little bit more. I just soften it with my brush. Totally correctable. Totally correctable. It just means that the water dried and I didn't carry it out. That's all that means. So, yeah, I think we kind of nailed it in under an hour. So if you guys want to unmute and ask any questions, please, by all means, come on out. Come on out.
Well, it's a beautiful painting.
It was a quickie and it was fun. And it just goes to show you how much you could get done in such a short time. You don't have to spend a gazillion hours on something. You could really just loosen up and have some fun and, not really be so married to it. I want to show you guys, you could see I have a bunch of frames around the office here. So let me just take one. So a nice way to see if you think a painting is done, sorry, I'm attached to my tether here. So you could take any old painting that you have and, and you could just say, well, let me just tape it right on top of my frame. And then you could hang it up and you could say, well, I'm not sure if it's done, but you know what happens, guys, is your painting starts talking to you. It'll start talking to you. So now there it looks almost like it's framed, right? So then I will hang it on the wall. Make sure I don't go sending out all my equipment flying. I will put it on my wall and I'll say, oh, okay. And maybe from a distance, you could start seeing what it may or may not need. It might not need anything. It might all be there. But that's a really good way for you to think about seeing is it done? Is it not done? What do I need? What don't I need? It probably doesn't need as much as you think it does. You know, there is something I'd like to do to it. How much time we have? All right, we got a couple minutes. I love drips. So I'm going to switch cameras and just show you some drips, because I love them. So why would I drip? I don't know, because it's a watercolor and because it's fun and because I don't have to be so literal with everything. So what I would do is I would take my regular spray right here, and I would add some water to it. So I'm just going to spray it. Come on, spray. Okay, now I got that pretty wet on the bottom. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my green and I'm just going to let it drip. You see where it's just dripping? Drip down. And I'm just letting it flow. I'm just giving it the drip up here to kind of find its way down. Maybe a little bit of blue. And, oh, I just love it finding a drip because it's a watercolor. And I think that makes me really happy. And I'm just not happy unless I have splatters and drips in my paintings. And I think it makes it much more interesting to have these drips sort of coming down. And notice that what I'm doing is I'm adding all the colors that I did in my painting, and I'm adding all the colors to my drips. Why not? Look at that, just dripping right down. And I think that's a much more interesting painting now. We don't have to be so literal with everything. We could just find a way in which to be kind of drippy and fun. And, you know, you want the viewer to see the fun that you had in it. So I'm happy I did that. I love my drips. Okay. So if people want to unmute and ask me any questions, I'm here to guide you through all of that.
Actually, we do have a couple of more things in the chat. Carmen is asking, do you have a template for this painting and which colors did you use?
Okay, well, I did describe the colors as I was using them. I don't have a template for this, meaning a contour drawing. I don't have a contour drawing of this particular image. So, you know, I did not do that. I did not. Usually in my classes, though, I will give everybody a contour drawing so that you're able to work and you'll see exactly what it is you know, what imagery I feel I need, you know, for the painting. So, yeah. So in this one, because this is a demo and I'm demoing the work, I'm not really, you know, I didn't really put together a contour drawing for this. And the colors, I did mention I used cobalt and cerulean. I used my different greens that are in my palette, and you could find all my colors. I actually have this as something that is downloadable, that you could just go right on and find all of my colors and all my manufacturers. And this is how I do my swatches. I'll do 100% of the value of the color here, and you want to blend it into white paper. That is a very interesting thing. Usually people will take this block and they'll just fill it in with color. But no, what you really want to do is you really want to see how that color moves from color into white, into the paper. Very important part. So this is available as a free download, as is all of my colors and all my basic supply list and all my, there's lots of videos there that you could take a notice that they're not classes. I haven't really built the class videos yet, but they will be available. Like I've done, I don't know, over 150 classes over the past year. So those will be available eventually. I just haven't gotten to doing that yet. So all the colors that I used my Schminky Orange, I used my Quinn Gold and Quinn Gold Deep, and they're all on my list. They're all like available to see on my list who the manufacturer is and the colors that I have. Yeah.
And I put Jan's website in the chat. If she didn't know what it was. We also have another question. Will this library recording be posted on the library website? Yeah, well, it'll be either on the website or on the YouTube channel, depending on the library. So look for that. And another question, where do you buy the spot spray bottle?
The dot spray bottle, I'll put it in the chat. It's called Everett's Watercolors. I think that's what it is. Everett's Watercolors. Watercolors.com. I think that's where it, I think that's how you spell it. I probably didn't spell Everett's quite right, but that's where you get the dot sprayer. So if you do a Google search for Everett's Watercolors, you will see the dot sprayer. And as far as I know, that's the only place that I've discovered that you could get it.
Okay, and Kathleen is asking, can you show us how to add some white?
Well, I could. You'll notice up here, I saved my whites. If, let's say I didn't, like down here is way too wet to do anything with white. But if I wanted to, there's a few different ways. We have what is called a white jelly roll pen. We have a titanium white paint. So there's lots of ways to get back a white if you wanted to. So for instance, let's say, where's my white? Hold on. Here's my titanium white. So here's my white titanium white. So if I lost any here, I could go in with my jelly roll and I could just maybe touch up a little bit around his eye, or this is for like little small areas, the jelly roll. If I wanted to really go in here, now this is pretty wet because remember I did that whole thing with, with adding the drips. So I'm just going to take, this is my titanium white, right there. And let's say I want to add some white splatter. Let's see if I could do it. It's probably going to mush up a little bit, but there is, look how we just added white. Doesn't that look nice? Right? But it's turning a little mushy because it's wet. This will be a much better mark once it's dry. So there's a timing to watercolor. So that's how I would do whites. You could also just take your rigger and, you could find different areas to go in and maybe add some whites. I mean, I kind of saved my whites, so I don't really need to, I feel, to do that. But, this is just too wet to, it's just all mushing up and it's not really gonna, you can see it's not staying white because it's too wet. So it's all timing. It's all a big timing thing. And that's what watercolor really is.
Did you say that spray bottle company was Everett's Watercolors? Everett's
Watercolors, yeah. Everett's Watercolors. Got wet all over here. Yes, I believe it's EVERTTS or something to that effect. I'd have to look online and find it for you.
Yeah, I just Googled it, so I'm just trying to type it in there again.
Oh, wait, you know what? Here, I just found it. And if you go to this site, here it is here. This is to everybody. Okay, so let me send to there we go. Everettswatercolors.com, right there. And they have a dot sprayer. And the way that you work a dot sprayer, guys, this is a mister, so it's different. It just comes out in even mist. So I'll just put my water bottle, my water's a little bit. So this just comes out in even mist. Okay, but a dot sprayer, the way that it works is you must pump it in your water, and then what you do is you just tap it, and it kind of spurts out, and it's just a different type of water, the way the water is approached. And I will tell you that if you have an old Windex bottle, they spurt out. It's kind of interesting. You could use an old Windex bottle. They're kind of big, but they do work. And I will tell you guys, I'm just going to put this in view. If anybody is interested, we only have a couple of more spaces available. It's almost full. But if you're interested in learning all of these basic techniques of watercolor, I happen to have a workshop this Saturday at Gallery North. And it's going to be, this is what we're going to talk about, how to set up your supplies, watercolor brush techniques, color swatches, color wheel, color temperature, analogous and complementary colors, watercolors to magic ingredients, correction techniques, how to save whites and how to avoid mud. That's a lot to get in one day. And you get lunch too. And if you don't have the supplies, I bring all the supplies for you. So such a deal. So that's at Gallery North. You could go on to Gallery North's information. I'll just put it in the chat here too, if anybody is interested. I don't run these very often. I just happen to have this one coming Saturday. So I figured I would make mention of it in case anybody is interested in these techniques. I tell all and I teach all, and there's the link to that right there. I put that in gallerynorth.org. Yes, titanium is a watercolor. It is a watercolor. This is Daniel Smith, and it is a watercolor. Yes. Some of the whites are a little thicker and a little bit more opaque than others. So you will have a different opacity. And remember, whenever you add water to your painting and to your paper and to your paint, it thins it out, right? It definitely makes it, we have to move our paint with water. That's the big thing is that you need to move it with water. So I hope you enjoyed this little quickie 1 hour that we did. I love demonstrating this stuff. It makes me so happy to hear your questions and to know your interest, and that you are looking for answers on how to do a good watercolor. Watercolor is it's the perfect plein air. If you sit outside, we just finished a whole series of doing little still lifes. I'll just show you real fast. Again, I'm tethered, so I've just got to be careful here. But we just did, this olive oil. I'll show you this. And where's my strawberries? We just did all these little still lifes just to set something up, in front of you and, to try it. This was done predominantly with 2 or 3 colors. That's all it was. This too, but it says everything it needs to say. And I teach all of that. So these are some of the classes that will be available eventually when I get all of these classes that I've done over the past year, where we haven't been able to go out and see each other. I'll have all of them available on my website. But in the meantime, there's lots on my website that I will talk about all of this stuff over and over and over again. I kind of repeat myself a lot, but it is good repetitive stuff to hear, because then when you hear it and you understand it and you see what happens when you do these things, when you go and do your own painting, those thoughts will be in your head. And that's a really good thing, to just have some of these thoughts in your head as to how to avoid mud, how to get blossoms, how to embrace, how to spread paint, how to, when to do what, timing, move around, all of these things that I talk about will sort of be swimming in your head more and more, the more that you hear it and the more that you see what happens as a result of it, that, you'll have the desire to make these paintings yourself, and I see a lot of you, I see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of names that have been in my classes. And so, this is I just think it's the greatest medium. It really is. I'll be doing a trip to Italy in 2022, and we're going to be sitting outside painting away, this, and just a little palette and a few colors and a block of arches, is such a great way to go. So it's a joy. It's really a joy for me to share this with you and to share my passion for this beautiful medium and all the techniques that I figured out, because I got to tell you, I did not get what I needed when I took classes. And so I developed this as a result of what I needed and wanted and didn't get. And that's how I created this course, is entirely based on what I needed and the answers that I didn't get and how to start and build upon that. Does anybody else have questions?
Yeah, we just want to let everybody know that the libraries will be co-hosting another one of these demos
Yes.
in August. I believe it's Monday, August 16th. You can check with your library about registering, and we'll send you the Zoom link, and we'll do this all again.
We get to do it again.
So thanks everyone for coming, and thanks Jan for sharing your obvious passion for this topic.
Love it. My pleasure. It was great, guys. This is the most normal I have, is doing this with you guys. So thank you for coming on, and it's wonderful seeing all your faces. And thank you for taking this hour out to just watch something happen and know that, you know, you could do it. You could do it.
Thanks, Jan. Thanks, everybody.
My pleasure. Bye. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great evening, and thanks for coming on. And thank you, libraries.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan.
Bye now.